trust that you are all well. Today, on our Writer's Crusade, we will be undertaking a specific writing task. We will keep in mind and make reference to the information we learned in our previous composition sessions on parts of a composition or story, as we said, and the steps in writing a composition. So, what is our task based on? Let's look at it. You just discovered that one of your great grandparents is of a different ethnicity. Write a composition tracing your family line up to your great grandparents. Now, in that composition, also it says, state the changes up to your generation and how you feel about those changes. Now, that's your scenario. And remember, we looked at using various scenarios to formulate or to decide on what the title of your composition can be. Now, what title do you think you can choose from such a scenario? And I'll read that scenario again. You just discovered that one of your great grandparents is of a different ethnicity. Write a composition tracing your family line to your great grandparents. State the changes up to your generation and how you feel about those changes. Now let's see what were some of the key words or points to help us choose a title. In the second part of the scenario, we are asked to write a composition tracing our family line up to our great grandparents, or let's say your great grandparents. We have the term trace your family line, which helps us to understand that we have to follow something. And in this case, we are following our family line, or simply who are the people responsible for us being here. Now, if you think back to your social studies lessons, you might be able to make reference to one of your lessons on the family. I am sure that you would have come across the term family tree. And your family tree simply gives you a description of all the people or up to a particular stage who would have started your family up to the point where you exist. Or let's say to your generation. So if I think about my family tree, I'm going to be thinking about myself, my parents, yes, my siblings, the parents of my parents, their siblings maybe too, and so on. So you're thinking of all the people that were there before you. So here I have two suggested titles. I know very common, we might just want to say my family. And that can be okay. But since we are writing about our family tree or our family line, we might want to give our composition a heading such as my family line or my family tree. So, as we look now, let's go through the next step of our writing process, which is brainstorming. So let's brainstorm. Always try to think of some possible words that you may use as you write. Remember, you have to make reference to the scenario or think back of what you're writing about. Since we are writing about our family and tracing where our family would have come from, let's think of some words that we can use. Here I have a few suggestions. Family, ethnic, grandparents, descent, married, live. Now these are just a few words that I would have identified. Can you think of other words that you may use when you are writing a composition of this nature? So we are still brainstorming. So now you would want to think about who are some of the people that you would mention in your composition. Again, go back to the scenario and see what are some of the things you have to write about, and that will help you to determine who are some of the characters to be used in your story. I have a few suggestions here as well. our great grandparents. So it means we would include our parents, their parents, which are our grandparents, and their parents, which would be our great grandparents. Ensure that you have the names of these persons from both sides of the family. You may also need to know about their offsprings or other children, if not the name, the amount of children that they might have had, because you won't want to make your composition way too long as well, but you need to stick to the task. What is it about your family? We would see that the word ethnicity is mentioned, and so we therefore need to include some information about ethnicity or ethnic group, more particularly the different ethnicity of one of your grandparents. So you must make mention of your family's ethnicity, and in some case, you may need to let your imagination kick in here because in real life, you may not have a great grandparent of a different ethnicity, but for the writing purpose, you will need to ensure that you present one of them as being of a different ethnicity. Remember that your composition is based on the task that you were given in the scenario. So, if it said that your great grandparent, one of them, is of a different ethnicity, that is a very important piece of information that you need to make sure you bring out in your composition. So, here is where you will definitely need to let a little of your imagination kick in. And remember, that is if you don't have a grandparent who belongs to a different ethnic group as your family. How did you find out about your grandparent who was of a different ethnic group? Now, we had some questions also we said we can use as guides: the when, the where, the what, and then we had the how. When. There may be some dates or year periods you may need to use or mention in your composition. Where did your family originate from? You can give a little information on that as well. Remember, we are in the planning stage. How do you feel about your family and what you found out? Now, once you would have completed your brainstorming, and remember in your brainstorming, you're coming up with what ideas you can use to develop your composition. So, once you have those, you are now ready to write. So, I would have gone ahead and I would have written a composition. And so, I will share that with you today. Remember, this is just an example. It is just something for you to follow. Your composition can be and will be entirely different. So let's go on. If you pay attention, you will also see that I would have separated my composition into what we learned about parts of the composition. You take note as I read. It is very important to know the people in your family. Even though we don't all live together, knowing them and spending time with them can be fun. My name is Anna Brown. I am 11 years old and of African descent. My mother's name is Mary Brown and my father is Harry Brown. We live on the west coast of Demerara, Region 3. My father's parents are Alice and Larry Brown. They live in Vigilance on the east coast of Demerara. My mother, before she was married to my dad, lived in Charity, Region 2, with her parents, Edward and Martha King. Both of her parents have many siblings, but they live in other regions in Guyana. My family hardly gets to spend time with each other because we all live far apart. So my parents decided to host a reunion. My mom invited both her parents and her four siblings, while my father invited his parents and his three siblings and their children. The reunion was held last Easter Sunday. Everyone arrived a day before the grand event. I was so excited to see everyone, especially my grandparents. While my parents and the others made preparations, my grandparents spent time to tell us stories from long time ago. Grandma Marva walked with many pictures to show us some of our family members we have never met. While looking at the pictures, I saw Grandpa Edward sitting on a woman's lap. So I asked who she was. Grandpa Edward told me that she was his mother, my great grandmother, Annie. But I was confused since she was light skinned and had very long hair. Grandpa explained that his mother was actually an Amerindian woman, but that they took the looks of their father, Kenneth King, who was of African descent. I asked Grandma Alice about her parents, Laura and David, and she told us that they were of African descent too. I was surprised, but happy to learn that our family had someone who belonged to a different ethnic group. I asked Grandma Marva if I could keep the picture, and she said yes. I wish I could have met my Grandpa Edward's mother, but I will cherish the picture of her. The day of the reunion was so much fun. We played games, sang songs, and told stories. We had lots to eat and drink as well. It is great to know my family, even those who I never had the chance to meet. My family is the best, and I love them all. Now, there you had it. That was a story that I would have come up with. And if you go back to the scenario, let's read the scenario again and think about all the things that we were supposed to do. And then you can check to see if all those things were done. You just discovered that one of your great grandparents is of a different ethnicity. Write a composition tracing your family up to your great grandparents. State the changes up to your generation and how you feel about those changes. Now, as you read that composition or as you listened to that composition, do you think the task was accomplished? Now, these are some of the questions that can help you to decide whether or not the task was actually accomplished. Did we give an account of our family as far back as our great grandparents? Did we show that one of the great grandparents was of a different ethnicity? Did we identify at least two ethnicities in the composition? Now remember, if one of the great grandparents is of a different ethnicity, it means that you have to be of another. So at least there should have been two ethnicities in your story. You could have identified more, but at least two. Was the writer included as a character? Why are we asking this question? Or why is this question important? Remember, the task said your family line. So you, the writer, most definitely have to be a character in this story. Was there mention of the writer's family members' names? This is also important because you have to trace it back. And if you're doing work on the family or if you're writing about your family line or family tree, it is important to give information about your family name. Remember, we are now at the review stage once we would have completed writing the composition. So we need to be careful and we need to check for the details. So these questions are very important just to help us to recheck to see if we would have included these details. Now remember, this is just one task. That is why in the beginning I said today we will be looking at a specific task. Remember also that at the review stage, you check for your spelling and your punctuations, which are very, very important. Now, I want you to take this scenario and you write your very own composition. It means that you would be giving us details about your family line and how your family has changed and evolved. Remember, you want to talk about your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, yourself. You must be a character also. Now, to get information about what you may have to write about, you may want to talk to your parents or your grandparents if you don't have all the details already. Now, once you would have completed writing your composition, give someone your work to read. I gave you mine to read, so take the time and read your story. Have fun as you read, and remember to join me, your teacher, Ms. Shamshireen, again right here on the Learning Channel.